Welcome back to the Lore 101 series part 6. And if you haven't watched the first 5 videos, honestly, that's fine because it's time for the Sundering. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Jin, and let's get into it. In the last video, we went over the events of the book Demon Soul. Oh, and by the way, there's a quick point of clarification. Originally the big shiny golden disc that was called the Dragon Soul, but once Neltharion went all Deathwing on everyone, it was rebranded as the Demon Soul. No real reason given, it was just being used for evil rather than protecting Azeroth from the Legion, so it just felt right. Okay, quick recap from last time. Neltharion unleashed the power of the Dragon Soul on everyone, and the Blue Dragonflight are now on the brink of extinction. Ravencrest was assassinated, leaving the truly incompetent Lord Desdil Stareye in charge of the Kaldorhai Resistance. Oh, and I made a tad mistake. Okay, kind of a big mistake in part 5. Yes, Tyrande was captured, but I said Xavius jumped through the portal. No. In fact, what went down was Chandra thought Xavius needed several wooden shafts to decorate his midsection, and Malfurion loved this idea and ran with it. He cast a spell on one of the arrow shafts kindly supplied by Chandris and turned it into a full-on tree. So yes, Xavius is now gone. Again. For now. Tyrande was taken captive, which sent Malfurion into such a deep depression, he made all of nature sad with him. It wasn't all bad news though, because the war got rained out for 3 days. Illidan got rejected by Tyrande one too many times and thought the best way to deal with that was to switch sides, proving that if Illidan was a real person, he'd probably call himself an alpha, get stupid lucky because he invested in crypto early, and then spend the rest of his life being an insufferable ass. But he still wouldn't have Tyrande. She'd still be chilling with his patchouli oil-smelling twin brother Malfurion because he's not an uptight douche. And if you like Illidan, that's cool because early Illidan's got a lot of growing still before he becomes the edgelord we all love and respect. And finally, Ronan, Crassus, and Broxagar all agreed that if this war was going to end in victory like it's supposed to, they would need to step up their game and get the Tauren, Earthen, and anyone else they could find on their side. Now, in the previous 2 videos, I've made mention of Nasdormu being suspiciously absent, and honestly, that's something you should probably get used to. If you played through the storylines of Dragonflight and thought it was annoying that Nasdormu could never see shit in the Timeways, get ready for Nasdormu to disappear all the time. Because the way the narrative team has decided to deal with the fact that he is so overpowered is they just keep having him go missing. A lot. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Luckily, we get to find out why he is not currently with us. The sands of time are insanely chaotic right now, and upon further investigation, it would seem that the old gods have a hand or tentacle in it. Essentially, Nasdormu figured out that the source of the unstable timelines were linked to the Well of Eternity, so when he went to investigate, a scene straight out of Bible Black popped up from out of the waters. Luckily, he's slippery and managed to get away, but he still needed to deal with those gross tentacles. But for now, just know that's where our Time Lord is hanging out. Now, just like we established, Stareye sucks. Now, I have no direct evidence to back this up, but he was probably the worst military leader in Night Elven history. And honestly, you might be thinking, hey, isn't this 10,000 years in the past? How much history could there even be at this point? Actually, roughly 5,000 years. Anyway, the Resistance forces are losing ground to the Legion, and to make matters worse, our main characters have other things on their mind. With Tyrande being a POW, Malfurion doesn't want to even get out of bed, and we all know Illidan isn't going to help anyone since he's off hanging with Azshara. Some good news though. Ronan was able to coax Malfurion into doing something when he introduced him to the OG survival hunter, Holn Highmountain, of the Eagle Spear tribe, as well as the Earthen Dungard Iron Cutter. He was cool, but Dungard doesn't have a class artifact of his own. And last but certainly not least, we have the Furbog Ung-Ak. I think that's how you say it. Now, there's not a lot of lore with this guy, but he deserves a special shout out because as a member of the Timbermaw Tavern Guild, I have a fluffy soft spot for the Furbogs in the game. And yes, this guy is actually in the game in one of the Legion flashback scenarios, so yeah, you can find him. Slight problem with our new recruits though. Stareye still had the stance, no non-night elves, they're icky. Well, he obviously didn't react well when Crassus and crew showed up with their new friends. But there wasn't really anything Stareye could do, so he agreed that Jared's Shadow Song would be the leader of the others. Alright, let's check in with Tyrande. She was just hanging out inside this sickly green looking sphere somewhere in Azshara's palace. On this day in particular, she had some visitors. It was actually Azshara, Captain Varathon, and one of Ashara's handmaidens, Lady Vaj. This was the first time Tyrande had ever seen Azshara this close. She had to admit that the stories of Ashara's beauty didn't really come close to seeing it in person. She really did go to 11. On the other hand, Ashara was not impressed by Tyrande. Her first question when she saw her was, is this it? Is this really Elun's chosen? Besides, what is Elun compared to Sargeras? I don't know, Blizzard. What is Elun compared to Sargeras? Or compared to anyone, really? I think we should know. Anyway, Ashara asked Tyrande if she would like to become one of her handmaidens. Tyrande had a certain muscle mommy vibe that had been missing from her royal court, but Tyrande just said that she belonged to Elun. Captain Verithan couldn't help it and said, so do you and Malfurion both belong to Elun? Because you had just as easy a time rejecting Illidan. Ashara started busting up laughing and said, isn't it great having men fight over you? Especially twins. Ripping apart familial bonds just so that they can win you favors, it's just the best. Well, it was time for them to get going and check on how wide the portal was getting for Sargeras, and Tyrande was left alone once again. Alright, let's finally see what Illidan had gotten himself into. You see, he rode into Zenishari on the back of a fell beast and took one look at the Satyr and Highborn trying what was probably their best to open the portal wider. He knew that this could be his chance to make a good first impression with his new crew or whatever, so he stepped up to the edge of the well and showed off the great and powerful arcane tricks he'd picked up while working with Ronan, and made the portal much wider in the process. That really wasn't enough to get him in good with the boss though, so Illidan told Sargeras, you know, he knew how to finish the job. All he was going to need was the Dragon Soul. To which Sargeras let Illidan know that Neltharion took a lot of precaution because even he couldn't find him. But once again, Illidan had a plan, and he held up a black dragon scale and said, I can find him with this. Well, everyone was more than just a bit skeptical that this newcomer would be able to just waltz right in here, get in good with the boss, and just go and pick up Golem's ring. You see in this example, the Dragon Soul is the Ring of Power and Deathwing is Golem. You'll see why I made this poor attempt at a joke soon. Well, Sargeras was in a good mood today, so he let Illidan know that for all that he has done for him already, he really wanted to get him a gift. Figured he can get him something. Illidan tried to play it cool and was like, no, I don't, you don't need to get me anything. I'm good. I'm just happy to be on the the right side of history. But Sargeras insisted, and he shot 2 beams of flame through the portal and completely burned out Illidan's eyes. They were replaced by orbs of fell flame or whatever, and the poor guy fell on the floor in so much pain that he had to be dragged off to recover. They probably should have given him a snack. That's how I always patch myself up in-game. While Illidan was taking a nap, the Kaldor Resistance was having a hell of a time. Let me quickly summarize where they're at right now. Now, the front lines near Suramar were completely crumbling after Ravencrest's departure. The Legion was pushing them back far more than ever before. Ronan, Brox, they continued to fight as hard as possible, but there were really only 2 people. You need a raid size of at least 10 when it's current content, so they were outnumbered and the NPCs never really help in any raid fights. So, in an attempt to turn the tide of war, Crassus and Malfurion concluded they needed the Dragon Soul. Seems like our twins think alike. One wants it to defeat the Legion, the other one wants it to let the Legion in. Alright, cool. At this point in time, Tyrande was getting used to hanging out by herself inside the little orb. But this evening, she had another visitor. It was actually that same handmaiden from before, Lady Vaj. She was apparently there to rescue her. Tyrande probably knew something was up, so she asked her why. 'Cause you're a priestess of Elune. I gotta help. Well, Vaj pulled out this talisman and pointed it at the green sphere, and Tyrande was free. At first, Tyrande had been protected by this big, bright glow from Elune, but Vaj convinced her that, hey, this is a stealth mission, you need to turn that off. To which she responded by attempting to unalive Tyrande. You will never be her most favored. I am, and always will be. The 2 of them fought for a bit, and Tyrande just wound up back in her cage. As you can see, Lady Vaj viewed anyone that Ashara showed any interest in as a threat. Not a very healthy way to deal with that jealousy, Lady Vaj. She should probably work on that. Alright, let's check in with our adorable sad boy, Malfurion. Since he and Crassus decided that they needed to get the Dragon Soul, they first needed to figure out how the hell to find Neltharion. Mal really only had one trick, so his idea was to just go talk to Cenarius and hopefully he can help. Lucky for him, Cenarius did actually have a good idea. And yes, you're correct, it involved going through the Emerald Dream. Now, this next part about the dream doesn't go against anything that we ever saw in-game, but it also isn't supported by anything we saw in-game either. So I personally wouldn't be surprised if this part quietly is retconned out, but here goes anyways. The Emerald Dream is described as a backup copy of an early iteration of Azeroth, back when life was young and the world was full of lush forests. But that doesn't mean that's the only copy. In fact, Cenarius explained that there were not only snapshots in time that the Titan Keepers kept, there are multiple layers within the dream that Neltharion wasn't aware of, so he could use it to bypass any of the wards Neltharion may have put in place. After Cenarius finished up showing Malfurion how the layers in the dream worked, he decided to pull the whole, "Hey Cenarius, since I got you" trick, and asked him where the other wild gods stood on the whole help the Caldori resistance in protecting the very existence of this planet. Cenarius just said some crap about the die being cast. So Cenarius figured he would need a real status update the next time anyone asked him, so he went to go check on the wild gods and hopefully get them to agree with helping. Anyway, Malfurion was still standing around in one of the deeper layers of the dream, so he took advantage of this opportunity and went to see if he could figure out where Neltharion was. Turns out Cenarius was totally right because it didn't take Malfurion long to locate Neltharion's lair. Well, still deep in the layers of the dream, Malfurion was able to get a glimpse of the goblins hard at work building giant metal plates that would be used to keep his body intact, as it had been ripped apart from the raw power of the Dragon Soul. And as he watched the goblins work, Malfurion heard a familiar voice calling out for the goblin Meklo. Neltharion was insistent that he needed his plates installed right away, and his chief engineer wasn't confident that they were ready. In fact, what Meklo really wanted Neltharion to do was finally put the Dragon Soul down, because even just holding it and not really using it caused his condition to get worse. Eventually, Meklo won that argument, and Neltharion agreed he would put it somewhere safe, all while Malfurion was watching. He watched Neltharion put the Dragon Soul away in some secret compartment in one of the tunnels, and tried his best to remember the exact location, and made his way back to his body. When he returned, he broke the news that he knew the location of the Dragon Soul. When Illidan woke up in Ashara's palace, he was not feeling himself after his eyes got torched. To make matters worse, he was probably getting a migraine from all the craziness that he was now able to see. I kind of imagine it would be like if you could suddenly see more, if not all, of the electromagnetic spectrum, not just visible light. No clue what that would actually look like, but it seems like it would just be really confusing at the very least. As he finally got used to tuning out all this extra info, he realized that he'd been cleaned up by a few of Ashara's handmaidens. This is when Illidan learned that he had a few extra talent points or something that came along with these new eyes. First, he knew when someone dyed their hair. He apparently now had a built-in power scanner as well. Vaj was pretty good with arcane magic, but he was far better. As he was comparing power levels, Vaj handed him a blindfold to hide those gross-looking eye sockets of his. And that's when Ashara finally entered the room, and he was completely overwhelmed with how powerful she really was. And normally, Ashara wouldn't care about someone like Illidan, but he now had the mark of the Great One. See, it wasn't just his eyes either. He had tattoos on his chest that he hadn't even noticed until now. She was practically rubbing down his bare chest when Captain Verathan barged in. "So sorry to interrupt, but I've been sent for him." So the two of them left together after Ashara managed to ratchet up Verathan's jealousy just a little bit more. It would seem Verathan got the short straw and had to be Illidan's chaperone as he went after the Dragon Soul. And speaking of going after the Dragon Soul, that's exactly what Crassus, Mal, and Brox were up to. The three of them headed out and left Jared and Ronan behind to keep things going since Star Eye was worthless. And a bit of good news for the three of them as well. Rory returned while they were resting for the night along the way to Neltharion's lair. So he tagged along with them, but had to wait outside when they arrived at their destination as he was a bit too large for a stealth mission. Now normally I would skip this part, but I personally just find it interesting. I'll just sum it up really quick what happened. See, it turns out the crew blew one of their stealth checks along the way and they wound up having to take out one of these, a group of goblins. And here's the interesting part. Crassus actually managed to raise one of the goblins as a zombie, basically, to lead them to the secret entrance. His only explanation for necromancy was, "We are the servants of life, which means we are keenly aware of death as well." Creepy, bro. Now, I can't say Star Eye was actually completely useless. In fact, he came up with a plan that reorganized the resistance back into proper fighting shape. Now, let me quickly explain. You see, he had come up with a plan that was essentially send him some units and attack the Legion. And look at that, it was working too. Oh wait, no, it was totally just a feint. You see, Archimon had been looking for an opportunity like this and took out Ronan. And now that Ronan is down for the count, the Legion unleashed a wave of Doomguard bombers, dropping some red Kool-Aid that turned anyone that it touched into, well, something that resembles red Kool-Aid. Jared Shadowsong managed to rescue Ronan and even went to check in on Stareye, who was looking up saying, "We're doomed! Ah, we're doomed!" And it's a good thing Jared took off as soon as he did, too, because the Kool-Aid was dropped all over Stareye and his cadre of lackeys that he had installed, ensuring the military was completely useless. So Jared took over command of the battle and did everything he could from keeping the lines to completely breaking. Under his leadership, the momentum was shifting in their favor. Once he had managed to get the battle straightened out, he had a runner track down someone to save Ronan's life. And to his surprise, it was actually his sister Maev and another member of the Sisterhood of Elune that actually showed up. And she was honestly more than a little surprised to see it was her little brother that had called for aid, because the runner had told them the commander of the Resistance forces calls for aid. Her and the other Sister of Elune were able to save Ronan from whatever Archimonde had done to him. And that's how Jared Shadowsong took command of the Kaldori Resistance. Now let's check back in on Malfurion. He and Brox made their way through the tunnels following the little undead goblin as a guide. Crassus hung back due to him being a dragon, and they assumed Malfurion would have some extra warning system in place if other dragons tried to get his dragon soul. Luckily for them, Malfurion was busy getting his plates for holding his skin together installed, so they managed to find the dragon soul and just pick the damn thing up. Or so they thought. Because as soon as they picked it up, Malfurion went ballistic. You see, he clearly knew someone took his little precious, but thanks to a quick and dirty how to use the Dragon Soul tutorial from Crassus and some telepathic link thing he did, Malfurion blew a hole through the mountain and made their break for it. You see, it seemed that they were going to make it too. That wasn't until Illidan caught up to them and snared them with some big old stone fists that erupted from the ground. So he took the disc from them and proceeded to have them led back to the Janishari in bondage. Didn't take them very long to escape though, and their escape car in the form of Corey even showed up right in time. Well, they escaped long enough to remember that the bad guys still had the Dragon Soul. So they turned around and just in time to be blasted by the Dragon Soul, which sent them sailing through the air and crash landing on the side of some mountain somewhere. Yeah, that's nuts. Now, Tyrande was starting to get pretty damn hungry, even with Elune still sustaining her. And that's when a highborn she hadn't seen before entered the room she was kept in. "Priestess, I am Death from our Sunstrider. I've come to see if you would like to eat something. I can assure you that despite what some may desire, there is no poison or drug." And obviously at first she didn't believe him, but in time he was able to convince her to go ahead and have something. As he helped her eat, since her hands were still bound together, the two had a brief conversation about how he didn't think Ashara was in her right mind anymore, and how he had turned down to become a satyr. And I know what you're thinking, and you're totally right. He's going to turn out to be a good guy. We'll see him again soon. Luckily, Jared Shadowsong got some good news too, because he was already feeling completely inadequate to be leading the entire resistance when it wasn't that long ago he was only a guard captain in Suramar. Turns out Cenarius had managed to convince the wild gods to join in the fight. So I guess that die that Cenarius said was cast landed on something pretty good. Now Malfurion wasn't feeling quite as lucky though, because he woke up feeling like he had been hit by a mountain. Oh yeah, he was. Turns out the only reason they survived is Corey had managed to get off some spells just in time, and he had a plan to deal with Illidan too. Step 1. Malfurion to go into the Emerald Dream and lie to Ysera that Corey is dying. Step 2. Alexstrasza comes running to Corey's side because of course she does. Step 3. Apologize to the Dragon Queen for lying about Corey's condition. Step 4. Profit. Well, not exactly, but Corey wasn't feeling great after being zapped by the whole Dragon Soul thing, so he did get airlifted out of the area by two of Alexstrasza's consorts that had come with her. And Alexstrasza wasn't thrilled that the whole demon soul was in the hands of someone else, but Crassus knew how to put a positive spin on anything. You see, he explained that this was their best time to strike because the demon soul was going to be used to make the portal in the well wide enough for Sargeras to come through. So, it won't be zapping dragons. And at this point, she took that good news and ran with it, but leave it to Alexstrasza to put a damper on the mood because she reminded him that it was just her and Ysera left. Nosdormu is still missing, Malagos is out of commission, and obviously Maltharion is Deathwing now, so their 5 quickly became 2. At least they've got 3 flights, though, since the Bronze are still around. They just didn't have their boss. Now, speaking of Illidan, he and Captain Varathon returned to Zinashari, Dragon Soul in hand. When the two of them returned, there was a bit of a disagreement about who would be doing the honors of opening the portal for the rest of the way when Sargeras told them to all shut up.
I'll do it myself.
Illidan probably said some very different colorful Kaldori swear words in his head because he apparently was now planning on betraying them. And with Sargeras now in charge of opening the portal, the word got out that it was time to put an end to this little resistance that had been causing them so much trouble. The attack on the Night Elf lines was so intense that Jared was at a loss at what to do next. And he must have thought, what would Malfurion do? Because his plan was to go talk to Cenarius. And damn it, Malfurion must be right a lot because this was definitely a good call by Jared. Because of that call, I'm pretty sure Jared Shadowsong remains the only character in lore to ever lead a charge of wild gods against the forces of the Burning Legion. Or against anyone for that matter. The very sight of the wild gods charging into battle was so intense and so frightening that the force of the Legion did the unthinkable and began to run. However, Archimonde would not tolerate cowardice and melted the flesh of any demon that ran for it. Even with the reinforcements, Ronan couldn't help but feel like they'd need more. They would need the dragons to win. And wouldn't you know it, one arrived. But this one wasn't black or red or whatever. It was gray. Made of stone. Ronan must have been confused as hell until he saw Malfurion, Brox, and Crassus climb off this stone dragon. You see, Alexstrasza had created this flying Uber for them after she met up with Malfurion when they lied to Ysera about the state of Cori. She would have given them right herself, but she had to meet up with the other dragons because it was go time. And Illidan watched as Sargeras took control of the Dragon Soul and used its power to begin widening the portal. The well started to turn into a massive whirlpool as he started to open up the rift into Azeroth. Illidan looked even deeper into the well and what laid behind the portal. He had assumed the Legion had committed a sizable amount of their army, but what he saw proved that he had misjudged them. He saw what could only be described as an endless amount of demons in the Nether. And when he got a better look at what Sargeras truly was, he honestly probably couldn't process the sheer immensity of him. What he saw, he could not make sense of. And at the same time Sargeras was opening the portal, Tyrande got a visitor once again. It was actually the same one she just had. It was that Highborn from earlier that day, Dathromar Sunstrider. He had with him that same talisman that Vaj had used to open up her cell. He let her know that he and the rest of the Highborn loyal to him were getting her out of here. Tyrande was obviously skeptical, but he assured her that he could see the truth now. He even got emotional when he could no longer deny the evidence before him. Ashara had gone mad, and they had to move on. And everyone figured that if they're going to be ditching Ashara and going back to worshipping a loon, it would be a good idea to save her favorite priestess. And as the Highborn made their escape, they all took extra care to make sure Tyrande made it back alive. Because everyone knew they weren't going to be getting any hero's welcome if the person that they were trying to save didn't make it back. Oh, and let's be honest, without Tyrande putting in a good word for them, they'll never be accepted back into Night Elven society if Ashara's rule ends here tonight. Now, their escape from the city was relatively uneventful initially, but the word got out that Tyrande had escaped. Oh, and the Highborn are behind it, and the endless demon swarm began. Infernals fell from the sky, Doom Guards were assaulting them from the air, and waves of Felguard charged after them. One of the Doom Guards broke through their defenses and picked up Tyrande and flew her straight up into the air. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't blame Tyrande for what happened next. Operating out of pure instinct, she struck the demon down, but failed to take into account that she was pretty high off the ground still. Luckily, the fall wasn't too bad, but she did accidentally hurt Illidan's feelings when he offered her a hand up, and she called out Malfurion's name when she first saw him. Well, the two of them got into a bit of a discussion about the morality of embracing the Fel if you in fact intend to use the powers for good. Tyrande argued that embracing that corrupting power, you're just compromising yourself and drawing you closer to evil. Just like when I was a kid and told not to invite that evil into my life, even if I intellectually knew a Ouija board was just crap. My parents still considered it evil and not to be messed with. Illidan took the stance that you can't really know your opponent unless you fully immerse yourselves in their culture and their ways of thinking. And then the conversation just went over weird places when Illidan revealed his true intentions. He wasn't switching sides out of a greater ideal or in preservation of life. No, he switched sides to be everyone's hero. He even bragged about tricking Sargeras into giving his new super cool demon eyes. Rhonda was less than impressed with his burnt out eye sockets. The two of them went back and forth like this for a while until Illidan let her in on his plan. He was going to be switching the polarity of the well, which would cause the portal to, he's going to switch it from suck to blow, or blow to suck. Doesn't really matter. See, if his plan works, all the demons on Azeroth are going to be sucked back through the portal, back out into the Twisting Nether. Pretty cool plan, actually. Well, anyway, the battlefield was an absolute chaos at this point. With Sargeras now personally opening the portal, Archimonde was throwing everything he has at the Resistance, because once Sargeras was through, victory was guaranteed, so they couldn't put anything at risk. The battle was so intense that the great boar wild god Agamagan was struck down, sending Cenarius into a frenzy. His recklessness nearly cost him his own life as well, if it wasn't for his father, Malorn, the enormous white stag wild god. Malorn probably took out an entire battalion or two worth of demons, and would have taken out more had Archimonde not shown up. The two of them dueled to the bitter end, and Archimonde walked away the victor. Malfurion was pretty broken up over this whole scene, but Crassus tried to make it kind of adorable or something by explaining that Malorn didn't just save your teacher, he also saved his son. Didn't really help him feel better, but one thing did brighten his spirits, when the dragons joined in the fight. In fact, the dragons started to go nuts on the demons. And shit got real dark when Ysera saw the body of Malorn. He killed all the demons near his body, and made sure that the rest of them would suffer for this. In fact, the dragons were now in full assault of Zinashari, so Ysera was really sticking to her promises. The demons were in fact suffering. Thrond and Illidan were up on a high point above the Well of Eternity, where Illidan began to cast his spell to reverse the direction of the portal. The entire time he was trying to cast a spell, Tyrande was begging and pleading for him to stop, but once Illidan has his mind set on something, he's gonna do it. Illidan was really trying to focus now too, so he cast his silent spell over the area near Tyrande. It was actually bad enough listening to the constant drone of the battle, he didn't need Tyrande shouting at him as well. Tyrande was once again and always and forever correct. This whole thing was a setup. Sargeras was using Illidan to assist him in breaking through the wards that Neltharion had put in place on the Demon Soul. So when Illidan cast his spell, it let Sargeras through the wards. The portal would soon be open. This made Crassus nearly want to shit himself. And Alexstrasza was feeling the same way, so the two of them, as well as Ysera and Sordormi, yes, the same Sordormi you may have been running time rifts with recently, made their way to Zinashari to assess what can be done. And honestly, with all their planning, plotting, trying to figure out what they were going to do, it really didn't matter because Deathwing was here. And he was all plated up and ready to get his demon soul back. And he didn't care who was in his way. The dude was on a mission and he was heading straight for the stupid thing. Beeline, just crashing through demons, getting through it. He just wanted his demon soul back. And yeah, we'll check in on him in just a moment. And thanks to the dragon's assistance, Jared started to believe that they would actually win this fight. Those happy thoughts were quickly dashed when Maiev was thrown from her lightsaber. He did what any responsible sibling would do and charged into the demons and fought his way to his sister's side. They thought they were safe, but out of nowhere, a massive wind blew all around them and everyone on the battlefield was tossed aside. Everyone but Jared, that is. Archimonde strode onto the battlefield and said, "I can't have the druid, then I'll amuse myself with the so-called savior of his people." "Come at me, Archimonde," was all Jared said, causing Archimonde to laugh his ass off. I don't actually know why he was laughing, though, because isn't this what he wanted? Whatever. So Deathwing was going crazy trying to get past the spell that Sargeras had had on the disc and was nearly tearing himself to pieces, even more so as he tried to force himself past the spell. Scales were being ripped off of him, and as he tried to push through the shield, it was looking like he might actually succeed. The other dragons didn't like the idea of him succeeding, but they didn't like the alternative either. And strangely enough, the voices in Deathwing's head were telling him, "Away, away!" They had apparently turned on him. It would seem the old gods wanted Sargeras to come through the portal, but not really sure why they would want that. Anyway, Sargeras was done with this shit. He sent a spell through the portal that intensified the pain Deathwing was in 100-fold. But despite the unimaginable pain, he persisted. He pushed on, and he wrapped his claws around the demon soul. It seemed like the whole world exploded from Crassus's vantage point from the explosion that Deathwing unleashed. He held his precious high above his head and cried out in victory despite the horrible condition he was in. Then Sargeras shot his ass into the stratosphere. So Deathwing is flying off to who knows where, and the demon soul is falling back toward the portal. And Malfurion catches it. At this point, Malfurion, Broxigar, and Crassus were riding on the backs of the dragons and helping in any way they could, and Malfurion even took out Captain Varathon earlier with a massive sunfire or something, and the dude just fell into the portal. And Sargeras doesn't like this one bit. No, not one bit at all. And just says, fuck it. It starts to squeeze his big ass through the portal in the current condition it was in. At this point, Brox was riding on the back of Sora Dormy above the portal, and he looked down, and he saw Sargeras was coming through. And he knew that this was it. This was the death that he had been searching for. And he jumped. And at this point, Malfurion is still on Ysera's back, and he didn't even see Brox take a swan dive. Tyrande reached out to him, and he suddenly had a feeling of wishing to be next to Illidan again for some reason. And suddenly he was. The demon soul had granted him his wish, and he was now in two places at once. So they were actually both atop Ysera, and they were both down in the ruins of Zenishari next to Tyrande. Let's do it, brother. Together. Illidan was all in, and they both got to work. Now Brox found himself within the twisting nether, cutting down demons as they approached him. There was what appeared to be a literal endless amount of demons, and out of nowhere, he was crushed beneath a massive blow. With one eye still working, he swung his axe with all his might and connected with Sargeras, who let out a terrible bellow of outrage that deafened Brox. He looked up at the Titan, and he saw a being that was wonderfully perfect and terribly awful all at the same time. Sargeras raised his arm, holding a broken sword, and impaled Broxigar, allowing him to finally join his comrades from the past. Although, based on the rules of death in Warcraft, I'm not sure he was going to go to the Shadowlands. I mean, he died 10,000 years in the past, and they did say that time is not a construct of death. Anyway, I hope Broxigar got a wonderful afterlife, however that may work. Whatever. Anyway, Illidan and Malfurion worked their magic through the demon soul, and with this significant effort, they managed to pull off the little trick Illidan had planned on doing. They flipped the switch to suck. It wasn't without resistance, though, as the old god presence within the soul was working against them. But all of nature was aiding Malfurion at this point, and he had enough strength to resist both the old gods and even Sargeras trying to attack his mind. At least that's what they say. I don't know if that's true, but whatever. Demons were flying through the air and being sucked back through the portal, and to everyone else it felt like a light breeze. Even Manaroth, with all his power and strength, was eventually sucked on into the portal. Even Archimonde, who could have killed Jared a dozen times at this point, but he was just playing with him. He got sucked into the portal as well. But even after all the demons still on Kalimdor were being sucked into the portal, Sargeras was still clawing his way through. They hadn't shut it far enough yet. Crassus looked down at Sargeras trying to claw his way into Kalimdor, and he saw a tiny green body at the end of the Titan's sword. Broxigar. Now that obviously made him sad, but he managed to notice with his sick-ass dragon eyes that Sargeras was injured. Just enough that he had an idea. You see, he instructed everyone to focus all of their magic into the wound that Brox had made. It didn't hurt him, but it did surprise him just enough that he lost his concentration. Now, Malfurion, Crassus told him to take out the portal, and he did. The portal began to collapse until it ceased to be, and Sargeras was gone. And the well was now collapsing in on itself, and the Sundering had begun. Oh, and for reference, the Sundering is how the world went from this to this. Now, after that whole, two-body problem thing or whatever ended, Malfurion caught back up with Illidan just in time for him to witness him standing next to the well and gathering some of its water into vials, even while the well was literally collapsing all around him. Mal didn't like whatever he was planning on using those vials for, but they had to go, now. They all jumped on the back of Ysera and flew away for safety. Ashara knew that Sargeras wasn't going to be coming. That much was obvious. And when the waters came in, she threw up a shield that protected herself and her people still loyal to her. The weight of the waters pushing down on her shield were becoming too much even for her. She held the shield for as long as she could, but while she did, she began to hear voices. Let go, let go. You will be more than you ever were. Eventually she gave in, and the waters rushed in all around her and her people, but they did not drown. You see, she was overcome with a feeling that this was her fault. But no, this wasn't the deal that she had made. Deals? I like deals. For 1,000 years, bound beneath these waves, I have watched you. I have tasted your essence. Which, based on the geography, I can't quite make out how Nazoth was in the area, but let's just extend our disbelief here for a moment, and maybe he teleported them over there or something. Maybe the Sundering sent them for a wild ride through the oceans. Now, when everyone made it back and everyone was accounted for, they all tried to figure out what to do next, and it was pretty obvious to them. It's time to go. Head for Mount Hydril and don't stop until you get there. So the word was put out across all the resistance, and everyone started moving. Once they all made it to Hydril, disagreements almost immediately broke out between the nobles and the Highborn. But Tyrande stepped up and told everyone to just knock their shit off. Now Malfurion was near the shore of this freshly minted, brand new Great Sea, looking out over the waters when Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nozdormu showed up. They wanted the demon soul. So Mal pulled it from his little fanny pack and set it on the ground as he was instructed. The three of them did some magic dragon stuff or whatever, and now no dragon, not even them, could wield the demon soul. So Mal actually had to hide the thing for them. So he cast some naturey spell thing, some vines came out and, I don't know, whisked it away or whatever. Anyway, so it's hidden now. Cool. It's hidden. You see, Ronan had a pretty similar idea, and he was just chilling on the shore of this new Great Sea, just thinking. Damn, that was nuts. He was looking out over the waters at the debris floating onto the shore when he noticed something magic in the mix. It was Broxigar's axe. So Ronan went and got it and thought this was pretty weird, but he kept it and silently thanked the orc as he had been a constant friend and ally since they had arrived. Jared Shadowsong had led a group of both Highborn and some of the nobles to the top of the mountain after they had received reports about some very suspicious waters up there. When they got there, Illidan was pouring a vial of liquid into the waters of the lake, and this was the third vial he had actually poured in. Waters no longer looked like blue water, but a glowing azure full of arcane power. Jared could hardly believe his eyes and called out, "What in Mother's Moon are you doing? If it wasn't for your brother, I would have you." To which Illidan responded, "Always my precious brother." The captain, as well as a few of the other highborn and nobles, approached him, and Illidan attacked. He nearly took out everyone there until Malfurion stepped up and wrapped him up in some roots and vines or something. Strange that that's all it takes. Anyway, Maiev and Tyrande assessed the damage, and some of the highborn had been completely unalived. Maiev was ready to take Illidan's head off when Mal stopped her and said, "Your brother will decide his fate." Now the Night Elves were pretty panicked that Illidan had just created another portal for the Legion to come back through. Especially with the whole him dumping Well of Eternity magic in there and just kind of making a new Well of Eternity. So they begged the aspects if there was anything that they could do to undo his harm. Sadly, there wasn't anything they could do. But they did have a solution to their little problem. They were going to build a tree. The dragons made a nice little ceremony of this whole planting of the tree, and Alexstrasza presented a seed before they planted it. Taken directly from the mother tree in the Emerald Dream, Ganir. They stuck the seed in the ground, and Alexstrasza started the process. "I give strength and healthy life to the Night Elves, so long as the tree does stand." The tree started to grow crazy fast. Nozdormu then said, "I will be on the Night Elves' side once again, as I grant them continued immortality so long as the tree stands." Ysera then piped up and said, "I give the Night Elves the ability to dream once again. And to the future druids, I grant them entry into the Emerald Dream." Everyone took a step back, and then the tree began to grow even more. "Here stands before you Nordrassil, the World Tree," meaning the crown of the heavens. After the tree had gotten all big, Malfurion noticed that Nozdormu, Crassus, and Ronan had slipped away. So he went to go find them. Now Malfurion and Tyrande arrived just in time to notice Crassus and Ronan about to climb onto the back of Nozdormu to be whisked away back to their proper timeline. They noticed them approaching, so they did say some quick goodbyes and then climbed up on Nosdorma's back, and they simply vanished. Now, Jared was awake and was overseeing a quick little trial that they were holding for Illidan and what on earth to do for it with him. And honestly, he probably shouldn't have been representing himself because Illidan kept saying things like, "I'm the only one thinking of the future. When they return, they'll be treating me like a god because I'm the only one that understands them." He was obviously found guilty and was sentenced to a dirt nap. That's when Malfurion stepped up and said, "I think I have a better solution. Let's just lock him up because he's right. The demons might be back and we may be able to use him if that happens, even if it's 10,000 years in the future." And honestly, since the Night Elves were just made immortal, this seemed like a pretty good idea. So they just stuck him in a break glass in case of burning Legion box, and they gave the job of ensuring that he stays in that little box to Maya Shadowsong. And honestly, she was really happy to take that job because after he had nearly unalived her brother, she wanted to make sure he suffers. Anyway, that's where we'll leave it for now. But don't you worry, there is still way more story to tell, so let me tell you what's on deck. What was happening in Pandaria at the time of the Sundering? And what the hell is the War of the Satyr? And what could that possibly have to do with the Worgen? Learn the answer to these and much more next time. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and even tell me what I got wrong in the comments. And if you enjoyed all this and you want even more lore talking from me, you can check out the podcast I do with my co-host, Allie, Live, Laugh, Lore. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And with that, I will see you next time.